Hello, and welcome to part 2 in the lecture series on ChatGPT. In this video, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can help us with grammar, style, flow, punctuation. Because in academic and also in technical writing, we want to make sure that we are clear that our writing is balanced and simple. We want to be direct and engaging, and we really want to think about who our audience is, who our readers are, and make our writing appropriate to that audience. So we want to make sure that we don't just rely on ChatGPT to fix problems for us. We want ChatGPT to analyze our writing and explain rules and potentially give us suggested revisions that we then need to look at more clearly to decide if we can use them effectively or not. In this video, what I'm going to do is, rather than using Panopto and having a smaller screen with what I'm doing on ChatGPT in front of you, I'm going to superimpose the conversation between ChatGPT and myself in screenshots, so I can make that as big as possible for you to read, and you can pause the video at any point to look at it more clearly. So in this very first prompt, I said, please analyze the following sentence for grammatical errors. Bob lent Mike his book because he liked it. The response I got from ChatGPT is that the sentence is grammatically correct. ChatGPT explained that it has a main clause, a subordinate clause, and the elements within the sentence are properly structured. It reiterated at the end that there are no apparent grammatical errors in this sentence. Okay, so we could potentially leave it at that. When I teach grammar to my students, I always cover the area of ambiguous pronouns, and I would argue that he in the sentence is an ambiguous pronoun because it could potentially refer to Bob as well as to Mike. So I followed up by asking ChatGPT to analyze if the sentence will be clear to a reader. Initially, ChatGPT responded that this should be clear to a reader, but if you look at the paragraph at the bottom here, in the second sentence, ChatGPT admits that, however, if there is any potential ambiguity or confusion surrounding the identity of he in the second part of the sentence, whether it refers to Bob or Mike, you might consider rephrasing it slightly to enhance clarity. So it then gives me one possibility. Because Bob liked it, he lent his book to Mike. I followed up by asking ChatGPT to provide all possible revisions of the original sentence that can eliminate any potential ambiguity. So let's look at what ChatGPT gave me. Bob lent his book to Mike because Bob liked the book. It may seem a little clunky to some people because we're repeating Bob's name. In order to eliminate ambiguity, repeating information, in this case a name, is never a problem. It's better to be repetitive than to be ambiguous. The second possibility, Bob lent his book to Mike because Bob was fond of it. Yeah, that's fine. Bob lent his book to Mike because Bob enjoyed it. These are all sort of variations of the very first possibility here. Number 4, Bob liking the book lent it to Mike. I'm not sure about that one. Or the next one, liking the book, Bob lent it to Mike. It seems a little strange, a little odd here. Number 6, I think, is not a bad idea because Bob liked the book, he lent it to Mike. I think that we have an introductory clause here, and then we have the main clause, he, subject, lent, verb, it, direct object to Mike, indirect object. Number 7, Bob lent Mike his book because of his own liking for it. seems super awkward. The one possibility ChatGPT completely ignored is the possibility that maybe Mike likes the book, so therefore Bob lent it to him, so he can reread it. So that is not at all a possibility here, according to ChatGPT. So doing this, going through that, you can have ChatGPT give you different possibilities, and then pick the one that you think most adequately, appropriately expresses what you are trying to say, and does so in um, in the best way of making it flow, to achieve clarity, simplicity, and directness. All right, let's look at the second example. So in this example, I asked ChatGPT to analyze the following sentence for grammatical errors, and the sentence reads, procrastination is when a student waits until the last minute to do their homework. So the response I received was that the sentence is mostly grammatically correct. ChatGPT then breaks it down into these 3 bullets, each containing an explanation, and then continues to explain that the grammatical issue lies in the phrase to do their homework. So there is a plural pronoun, while a student is singular. So to maintain agreement between the pronoun and its antecedent, either both need to be singular or both need to be plural. So a couple things just to remember here is, using there as a pronoun is becoming more and more acceptable, even if we're referring to a single person. There are people who don't identify as gender binary, and they usually like to be referred to as they and their and them, and that would be another exception here. The problem is that it can still be kind of confusing when we're using a pronoun that does not agree with the subject. The problem with some of the suggestions that ChatGPT made here is, the correct sentence would be, is when a student waits until the last minute to do his or her homework. That's a possibility, but after a while, if we read something where every other sentence has he or she, he or she, he or she, his or her, him or hers, it gets kind of annoying after a while. Okay. The other thing I would not do is just deliberately change it to his homework unless it's absolutely clear that who I'm talking about is male. One suggestion ChatGPT never ever makes in this example here is to simply make both parts plural, is when students wait until the last minute to do their homework. Okay, that's usually the recommendation I make to students if it's a general statement, if we're not talking about one specific person whose gender we may not know. If we're talking about a generic statement, then changing both parts, the pronoun and its antecedent, to the plural form will solve the problem much more elegantly than using he or she. So I asked ChatGPT to provide a solution that eliminates the his or her construction and does not assume a gender. So the response I got was, we should change the sentence to, procrastination is when a student waits until the last minute to complete homework. That's an acceptable choice. So here we're just eliminating the pronoun altogether, and then we don't have to worry about the pronoun not matching the antecedent. All right, I then asked ChatGPT to rephrase the sentence to use the least number of words and to achieve the greatest degree of clarity. So is there an easier, more clear, more direct way to state this? And the response I received from ChatGPT is, procrastination is a student waiting until the last minute to complete homework. Okay, so it's shorter, it's clear. And then, just as a follow-up question, I asked ChatGPT to provide its definition of procrastination. So at the end here, we have this definition. It refers to the act of delaying or postponing tasks, often choosing short-term pleasure or ease over the completion of necessary or important activities, despite knowing the negative consequences that can arise from such a delay. What a student could do here is take this sentence, procrastination is a student waiting to the last minute to complete homework, and then, if desired, add part of this onto the sentence, choosing short-term pleasure or ease of the completion of necessary activities, or despite knowing the negative consequences that can arise from such a delay. So again, we can look at multiple answers from ChatGPT and combine them together into sort of the final product that makes the most sense for our writing. And in that sense, it is very helpful in giving us all these different options to choose from. Okay, so in the third example, we get some information on how we can use ChatGPT to potentially correct spelling or a word choice. So here I asked it to check if the following sentence is correct, and that's a pretty broad question, so I'm not giving it any particular criteria in terms of pronouns or anything else. I'm just saying, is this a correct sentence? The sentence is, the story takes place in a forest at night, and the eerie darkness is an allusion to the character's emotional isolation. The response I got was that the sentence is almost correct, but that there is a minor error, and that is the word illusion should be replaced with allusion. So we are alluding to a fact. Okay, an illusion is something different, and that's really basically all we need to correct the sentence. The fourth example helps us explore how ChatGPT can help us with punctuation. That's something I think a lot of us tend to struggle with. So getting some help here would be really great. So I'm simply asking it whether I need all the commas in the following sentence. Sometimes it's sort of a feeling we get is like, I have a lot of commas, but are they really correct? So the sentence is, we spent Thanksgiving with my Aunt Myrtle, my mom's sister, who made my favorite pumpkin pie. That's my grandmother's recipe. The other thing I wanted to point out here really quickly, I said in the following sentence. So in previous examples, I put a colon here and I placed the sentence I wanted it to analyze in quotation marks. That is not necessary, okay? So by giving this question here, ChatGPT knows from context that the sentence I wanted to analyze is this next sentence. So I don't need to use punctuation here to clarify that to the system. So the response is that the sentence could be made clearer and more concise by adjusting placement of the commas and just revising the sentence altogether. So the suggested sentence it gave me here for the revision is, we spent Thanksgiving with my Aunt Myrtle, my mom's sister, who made my favorite pumpkin pie. That is my grandmother's recipe. Okay, so it's the same information, but the way ChatGPT has rearranged the information and eliminated some of these awkward commas makes it much more easy to read. And it even reiterates this by saying that by removing the commas and rephrasing the sentence slightly, the structure becomes more streamlined and easier to read, and it completely still says what we needed to say. All right, in the fifth example, we get another way of using ChatGPT for grammar. So here, rather than feeding it a specific sentence that we're concerned with and unsure of whether it's correct, we can also ask it questions that are more general in nature and asking it to explain rules. So one thing I just wanted to reiterate here as we're looking at the suggestion it gives us, ChatGPT is not an expert or on anything, but what it's looking at as we're asking it these questions is basically the information it was trained with on the internet. So people writing grammar rules on the internet, people posting grammatical guidelines on the internet. When ChatGPT was trained initially, it looked at those data sets and incorporated them into the information it uses to provide us with that information. So here, I kind of made this up when I said I'm confused about when to use a hyphen versus a comma versus parentheses when defining a word in a sentence. And then I added, please explain this and then give 2 examples. So if you're asking it to explain things, asking for an example is always helpful because then you have more context in terms of how it will be actually used. So the response I got, and it's always very polite, certainly hyphens, commas, and parentheses are used in different ways to provide additional information or definitions within a sentence. And then it provides, first of all, a breakdown. So it explains how a hyphen is used, in this case to connect 2 or more words that function as a single concept. Example here, she is a well-known actress. So well-known is hyphenated. A comma is used to set off non-essential information such as additional details. Example here, John, my best friend, is coming to the party. So my best friend, this is a non-restrictive clause, is not critical to the understanding of the statement. It's just additional information that might be of interest. And then parentheses are used to enclose extra information that is useful but not necessary. That's one thing I want you to think about as you're writing the semester. Anytime you place information in parentheses, you are signaling to your reader that this is not critical information. There have been studies, and when people read text that has parentheses, they tend to skip over the parentheses and the parenthetical information. So if it's important information that you want your reader to know, please don't put it in parentheses. Okay, and then here we have specific further examples. For the hyphen, the sentence is, he is a self-employed graphic designer. So self-employed needs to be hyphenated because the self refers to the status of employment, whereas graphic and designer needs to be 2 separate words. Okay, comma, the novel written by a renowned author became a bestseller. Again, we could just say the novel became a bestseller, and that's the main information we need to know. Parentheses, the mountain, known for its challenging trails, attracts experienced hikers. So again, this could be important information. If a student came to me with this sentence, if I thought that this was really important information, that the trails are challenging, I would recommend to that student to use dashes rather than parentheses. Again, parentheses tend to subordinate information. It's additional information that appears not to be as important as the information in the rest of the sentence, whereas the dashes, and I've highlighted them in yellow here, draw more attention to the information that they surround and emphasize their importance. So let's take a look at example number 6. So in example number 6, we are looking at style rather than grammar. So sometimes we're not necessarily concerned that a sentence is grammatically incorrect. Sometimes we read our work and we kind of notice that it feels a little awkward. So what I said to ChatGPT is, the following sentence feels clunky to me. That's very conversational. So we don't need to use very formal language with ChatGPT. And that's the nice thing about it, is we can communicate with it in a very natural way. And from the context of all the information it has been trained on via the internet, it will know what clunky means. I said, please rewrite it so it's smoother. Again, that's kind of a colloquial kind of term here. That's not an academic or formal term in writing, but ChatGPT will know what that means. So I wanted to be smoother and easier to understand. And I said, if you need to break it up into multiple sentences, that's okay. So what I did here is I hit the return key. I wanted to have a space in between the directions and um, the the sentence. And what it did is I ended up entering my prompt, and very politely it reminded me that it needed to see the sentence to give me feedback on it. So you see, of course, please provide the sentence you'd like me to rewrite, and I'll do my best. Okay, it is very polite. All right, so the sentence I gave it here, due to the fact that the level of Generation Z voter participation in recent elections has experienced a significant upswing, political candidates are exploring the possibility of an increased utilization of social media platforms to achieve a closer connection with that demographic. So I almost ran out of breath reading that. Okay, that's a super awkward sentence. I made it up. Okay, so a lot of nominalization, and whenever we are expressing actions through nouns rather than verbs, it really tends to obscure what's going on. Okay, so the answer I got from ChatGPT, the suggestion here was, because Generation Z voter participation in recent elections has significantly increased. That's our preliminary introductory clause that ends with a comma. And the main clause is, political candidates are now considering using social media platforms more extensively to establish a stronger connection with this demographic. Now, um, I tried something here, and basically what I wanted it to do was to find statistical data that it could use to incorporate into the sentence to support the claim that there's actually an increase in Gen Z voter participation. So it gave me, as a result here, recent elections have seen a remarkable upswing in Generation Z voter participation, with a 20% increase in voter turnout among this demographic compared to previous elections. So here it's actually making it two sentences. And it sounds really great. So as a follow-up question, I said, can you identify the source of the statistical fact? And the response I got was, I apologize for any confusion, but the statistical fact provided in my previous response is for illustrative purposes and not based on actual data. So again, it comes back to, if we want the actual data, and if you were writing a paper about this topic, then I would absolutely need you to look at actual data. You would need to do the research to be able to incorporate that into the sentence. But you still have the advantage of having ChatGPT help you with expressing the idea in a more straightforward and well constructed way, and then you can do the additional work of researching the actual pertinent facts and kind of plugging them into that sentence to have that information support your claim. And again, that's sort of how we combine our own personal effort that we know we need to invest here with some of the help that ChatGPT can provide for us. In example number 7, I wanted to introduce another important tool that ChatGPT can provide for us, and that is clarifying information. So what I did here is I took a paragraph from an academic journal and asked ChatGPT to rewrite that following paragraph for a reader at a 7th grade reading level. If you wanted help with making sense of a article from a peer-reviewed journal that you needed to analyze in order to do research, and to write a paper. You could make it appropriate to a undergraduate college student. Again, the 6th or 7th grade reading level is generally what we assume for the broad American public. But sometimes these articles can be very, very challenging to read. So having ChatGPT rephrase it for us in a simpler way can be helpful. Now, I'm not going to read all of that. So it gave me this response here. In Scandinavia, people used to count the passage of years in a special way. Some parts of this old way of counting are still found today. For instance, in Sweden, they followed something called the lunar solar method until the early 1900s. Some of the writing in this version is a little awkward in that fourth paragraph, for example, here. For example, in the year 1220, there's a book. That's really bad writing. So was this book authored in 1220? So this book dates back to 1220. I would not use the writing in this for a paper, and I'm also not sure if the way some of these things are phrased, it's really necessarily helpful. So in terms of tone and readability, I wanted to try something else. So my next prompt to ChatGPT was, can you rewrite your revision assuming the perspective and tone of a university professor whose readers are a freshman college student? So how would I rewrite this paragraph if I wanted to make it accessible to my students so they could read it once and understand what's going on? And that's when we got the following output. Again, it starts here with, certainly here's a revision with a more academic tone. Okay? And again, ChatGPT has a very, very strong understanding of tone, suitable for college freshmen. And I would argue, and again, I'm not going to read it. If you want to read it, pause it and look at it in more detail. But here we get the same information more clearly than in the original version, but in a much more sophisticated style than the initial revision from ChatGPT that was geared at the 7th grade reading level, and just really butchered it in a way that is not necessarily helpful to a college student. So again, look at the different possibilities here, pause the video, and see the differences it makes when we're asking ChatGPT to make it accessible to the actual appropriate audience of readers. I hope that this video has been helpful for you in terms of how ChatGPT can help you with grammar, with style, and even with tone. The most important takeaway from all this that I would like to emphasize again is the fact that we cannot rely entirely on ChatGPT to do all of the work for us. As one of the examples pointed out, ChatGPT believed that the sentence was grammatically correct, but until I prompted it about it, it did not realize that there might be a problem with ambiguity because of the ambiguous pronoun. So it will be helpful to have a sort of fundamental understanding of grammar as you are using ChatGPT to help you with it. So if you are a student enrolled in my English 102 courses, you know I'm going to be covering a whole range of grammar in our class this semester. If you're taking this as one of my students in technical and scientific writing or business writing, I'm going to also identify these resources to you as part of our course. If you're watching this as someone who stumbled across it on YouTube, I have additional lectures on specifically grammar. So since you already have access to my channel, you'll find a video on fundamental grammar components. If you're someone really struggling with grammar, you might want to look at that, as well as the one on conjunctions. And then I have individual modules on subject-verb agreement, apostrophes to indicate possession, avoiding sentence fragments or fused sentences, run-on sentences, one module on pronoun antecedent agreement, and several more. So make sure you look at those and have sort of gain a basic understanding of grammar to then know what kind of questions you may want to ask ChatGPT as you're probing for help. And while we're on that topic, the next the next installment in these video lectures will be on prompt engineering, because there we're going to talk about how we can input specific prompts that are very clear and very specific, so that the output from ChatGPT, the responses we get, are as constructive, as productive, and as meaningful as they possibly can be. So I look forward to seeing you there.